All right, guys. Hey, this is our first Data Sharks video cast. We've got part of the crew here with us. Arcadie's not with us. He'll be with us a little later. But I got Glenn and Rich down, at least on my screen. They're down below, and then we got Troy Clemente on the top right. But you know, we're all kind of talking about what location we're calling in from. Glenn's calling in from some kind of patio in Sarasota, and Rich has. Rich has you know, he can see harbor seals from where he's at. You know, pretty soon there'll be
probably data sharks, right?
Yeah, and then Troy's gonna have drum lessons here going on pretty soon. So
yeah, my son has drum lessons in about an hour, so if you hear some loud banging, it's not me, trust me.
Well, we may have a visit from the data warehousing cat in a little bit. She's stirring in her little bed over there, so.
So some of the things that we wanted to chat about today, or that I've been thinking about, are you know, I get questions a lot, and sometimes I don't even know how sincere people are being in this question. Is, you know, so what do you do for work? And honestly, like, answering that question is, I mean, it's a little frustrating.
Chandler Bing from Friends, right? What does he do?
And do you really want to know? I mean, that's like the biggest thing, is like, because I could actually try and explain it to you, but do you really want to know? I'm curious what you guys say. Like, Troy, I'm curious what you say on the, just, you know, from the business side of things.
I've been married 27 years now. My wife still has no idea what I do. So I haven't really got that message across very effectively. But it was, you know, I try to make things very simple and say we work in data. What does that mean, right? It's like everything you deal with has something to do with data. And we go to supermarkets, and I say, well, you know, you're watching people here check out, and you're watching people buy things. How do you know what to order? How do you know how many things somebody has bought? And that's kind of what we do. We're involved in information. So everything you see and do and touch, we're involved with. So it's pretty encompassing, but it's actually true.
What do you guys say, Glenn and Rich?
Yeah, my kids think I'm the brain surgeon of data, is what they call me. What's Dad do? He said, I don't know. He does something with data, and he's
they're not wrong.
Brain surgeon of data. Yeah, when anybody asks me, the one thing I tell them, it has nothing to do with computers, because if people think that you work in computers, then you get the phone calls. Oh, my Microsoft Word has got a problem. I can't do this in Excel. You know, I
got a beach ball falling on my screen. Can you help?
So I've kind of gotten into the mode where now I tell people, because the thing is, we don't just work in data, right? Because, like, you could be just a straight data analyst and be a guy that works in data, right? Because what we do is set up like automated processes to make data into information, you know, and it's so much more automated. So what I'll usually tell people now is, like, look, we build data to information factories. So if you really want to understand that, it's like you've got a lot of raw data on one end, and you need information on the other, and you don't want to have to manually build the connection between the two every single time. So what we do is, you know, turn that data into information on a regular basis. And I mean, the audience for Data Sharks, I can tell just from the registrations, is a fairly mixed audience. It's like, we've got some business people, we've got some technical people. And I mean, the reason I want to kind of bring that up is because even some of the technical audiences of the Intricity 101 videos, they basically say, like, look, just the ability to figure out ways to explain this to some of my business, you know, users is a heck of a lot. It makes a heck of a lot easier if you can come up with some kind of explanation like that. So just, I mean, on the information side of this, I want to get some history.
Jared, I'm going to laugh at you very quickly.
Go.
So four of us have gone, and we still have not explained what we did. So I'm just saying, there's still questions. So what do you do? We didn't really explain that, right?
All right. So we
often when I tell
it is hard. It is hard.
Well, I always tell people, you know, data by itself is just ones and zeros, right? It's a bunch of data, and most of the time when you look at the raw data, so kind of think matrix here, you know, it's not all that different. It's just raw data, just exactly. What we do is we curate that data into something meaningful.
So we take it from that raw, meaningless data
and
turn it into actionable information that you can use now to make business decisions, turn it into something that's meaningful, strip out all the noise and make it so that now it's meaningful data.
But I think the key thing is making sure people understand that it's an automated process to do that.
Yes.
Because people do that today all the time. Yeah, we build that factory. We build the factories that
the assembly lines.
Yes. That
because if you think about it, we're not all that different than a manufacturing situation where I get raw materials and by themselves are meaningless. I get some metal and I get some wood and I get some other materials, and then going through an assembly line and processing that into something meaningful, then out comes at the other end of the factory, something that you would buy in the store or whatever that may be. That's what we really do. We take that raw material.
We're the industrial engineers of turning data to information.
Exactly.
Now we're sounding important. Very nice.
Now that sounds very important.
Yeah. I had one of my sons was asking me one time because they'd always ask when they were in school. It's like, what does your dad do? What does your mom do? That type of thing. And so I was trying to explain it to him. And when we lived out west, he and I used to go hiking in southern Utah. I don't know if any of you have ever been hiking in southern Utah.
Yeah.
Some amazing hiking places out there, but there's a lot of canyons and slot canyons, and so you've got to know where you're going because you could get stuck, and then there's 200-foot drops. So you've got to know what's going on. And so I was trying to explain to him the difference between data and information, and what I did basically. And so what I did was I took the in 10-foot squares the elevation information for an area where we were going hiking, and I just plotted that out like in an Excel spreadsheet. So basically you had little squares and it had the elevations, 100 foot, 4,000 feet above sea level, 4,100 feet. So it was just a whole bunch of numbers on this spreadsheet. And I gave this to him. I said, oh, here's the map. So you figure out the route that we need to hike to go find these Indian ruins. He looked at me as like, this is ridiculous, Dad. So then we took a topographical map and I showed him and compared. This is the exact same data. The topographical map is that data that's been processed and turned into information so that we could easily read it to be able to see where are the places that we can get down into the canyon to go find the Indian ruins. And so it kind of was an aha moment for him of, there is a huge difference between data and information, and having that, the ability to, like you said, industrialize the transformation from that data to information. That's a huge thing. So
yeah,
oftentimes customers will tell us, well, we don't have that data or we can't get that information, and oftentimes we say, well, let us see your data, and we in looking at the data and understanding what it means, we can build bridges of information that don't exist naturally.
Yeah.
So you get data from one system like a CRM system, and you get data from an ordering system, and you get data from a financial system, and you get all this data together, and then we can build, if you will, bridges or links, and this is what we do, to bring meaning together that didn't exist in its separate entities. And so if I know what's coming out of the CRM, and I know something about my customer, and I know something about their billing, and I know something about their ordering, all of a sudden I can start telling you a lot about that customer that in each individual system I didn't have visibility to that.
It's almost like two things have been brought up. Like Rich brought up sort of the visual, like the visualization side of it, and really being able to see what that really represents. And then there's this side of it that, I mean, I don't know if you guys have ever looked at Nassim Taleb's work, but one of the things that he talks about is, like if you're crossing the street, and he really rails on big data. He hates big data. He thinks it's like just a total waste of time. And he says the big reason why is if you're crossing the street and you need to take in certain information to give you feedback on what you should do, right? Now, big data is just basically everything. It's the color of the cars. It's the size of the pebbles in the asphalt. It's the color of the sky. It's the brand of the cars, the types of shoes that you're wearing, like just every piece of data. Yeah, and it's just pure noise. It's all noise.
It's not all usable.
Yeah, and so I think part of what Glenn's talking about here is the concept of yes, formatting it is important, but also just getting rid of the noise so that it's actually informational. And I think in our efforts to become to centralize all the data in one place, I think a large part of what we do is get rid of the noise and organize it. That's where a lot of the effort is. Because again, you're crossing the street. Do you really need to know the size of the pebbles in the road? It's irrelevant. You need to know if a car is coming, and you need to know if you have a walk sign. That's it.
More importantly, too, Jared, is different information is important to different folks, right? So different people in the organization want to see different things. So all that big data has meaning, but
and I got a video coming out about that around access control. And that's another really important topic, and it's something that's become majorly important with the advent of Snowflake and just these highly centralized sets that you can actually do queries on. If you have all of this data in one place and you have this data state that's just massive, well, now it's just noise to everybody. If everybody can see everything, it's just noise everywhere. So all of a sudden, this topic of access control has become a major issue because it is noise to most of the people. The stuff that's informational to you is totally irrelevant to the guy in HR. He doesn't really care. Well,
and you want to keep people focused, also.
Right.
You don't want to provide all kinds of data to everybody in your organization that's going to keep them distracted, and you want them focused on the information that you really want them focused on, so that they can take that and be able to take decisions and help your organization move forward. So
and that's one of the arguments.
Walk into a restaurant with a menu with about 1,000 different items, just
yeah,
face.
Yeah, and you're like,
it's kind of the same thing. It's like,
I've been to several Chinese places that are like that.
Yeah, you go like, I want a number 45,000.
It's a New Jersey diner. You go to a New Jersey diner.
It's ready in 10 minutes, no matter what it is. So that's one of the benefits here, no matter what it is.
Yeah, you got Alaskan sea bass in New Jersey, and you're in a diner. Yeah, it's like.
It's all tilapia, same thing. They just put different seasonings on it.
They give it to you, and it's like a book like this thick.
Yeah,
like,
so same idea. For
you have a sandwich in there?
That's like you said, Jared. I could see the harbor seals right out here. I went out to visit in Utah. My cousin's like, let's go out to dinner. I said, okay, where are we going? He said, there's this great seafood restaurant right over here. I said, okay.
Utah?
It's like, Utah. Okay, I live
Rhode Island,
in
Utah. Is there such thing as seafood in Utah besides the brine shrimp in Salt Lake?
Yeah. I got some delicious rainbow trout. It was excellent.
So. There you
go. That'll do the trick. So on the informational side, when it comes to the BI side of the house, and just this was really on what Rich is talking about with being able to display the information like you need. I mean, that side of data and information and just the factory that we're talking about is, we've been around that side for a long time. Glenn's been around since
Speak for yourself.
Pre-Crystal days. Yeah, well,
we're younger.
Yeah, so it's the formatting, and that goes way back, right? And a lot of people, we talk about analytics. Now there's all these categories for different kinds of what I would just call canvases for data. But I don't know, Glenn or Rich or Troy, give us a little history lesson on where this all started.
I will. Yeah, well, it's been around for, I started writing reports on mainframes back in the early 80s, and back then we just lined things up on a screen, and put little, dashes across it so that you could see where the total line was. That was the extent of reporting back then. And of course it's evolved, and we've got, reporting that's print quality reporting, and then we have, dashboards that aren't intended to be printed. They're meant to be, navigated and consumed. But one of the fundamentals has not changed. And this is one that I always, as we work with anybody, is I say, we have a bunch of raw data over here that represents all of your data. Mm-hmm. We have business consumers over here. What do you want? It's that what do you want that is the magic between the raw stuff over here and getting meaningful information over here. And so back in the days before we had a lot of the data manipulation tools that we have today, we were pulling raw data into our reports. I remember writing reports and bring down 5 million rows of data and then start chopping it up, and doing things to it, and as you mentioned, Jared, today in a well orchestrated, organized data estate, a lot of this data is pre-prepared for the report writing and the dashboards. And so it really does become a canvas of selecting the information you want, and a lot of it is already ready to go. And that's what a good data estate does.
Has that made the tools, I don't want to say less capable, but like, has it, because there's sort of this segregation of duties, seemingly, has it changed the way the tools operate?
Well, it does. One of the things that's critical is that we want to have the processing of the data, the preparation of the data, done as much as we can in advance of having it be consumed. That way, then the consumption of it runs optimally. It's performant. In this day and age, we start to look at very detailed things. I want to see all my sales by month, by salesperson, and I want to know which one is performing to quota and which one's not, and all this different information. And I want to know what product lines are being sold more frequently. And all that data can be represent in this day and age tons and tons and tons of data. Yeah. If we try to crunch all that on the dashboard or the reporting side, that's where we run into performance problems and issues like that. And so that's why having things curated, and that's probably a good term to say there, is taking that raw data and transforming it into curated sets, meaningful sets that have a lot of the heavy lifting of that data processing is either already pre-done, or when it's queried by the reporting platform or our visual canvas, that they're simply asking for those data sets, and very little processing really has to happen on the canvas. It's mainly happening on the back end, and that's kind of where Snowflake shines, is that we can have this data estate with all this data in it and create these refined or curated data sets that are now pre-prepared for the business to consume. But getting from raw to that is part of what we do, and that's part of where years of doing this leads us to be experts in it. And it's being able to say, business, what do you need? What is the information you want? And when I talk to business, I'm always listening for this sentence, something like this. It says, well, if you could get us that information, then we could do this.
Well, and that's the key, Glenn, right? Like that, and that's the art of this, and where the experience comes in for years, because you'll see somebody, you go and talk to the business, you say, well, what data do you need? Which is the wrong question.
Well, I need everything.
Give me all of it. Give it all to me.
The discussion with the business is, what are your challenges? What are the opportunities here? And this is where the experience comes in building these factories. You talk about the curated data, right? Well, how do you know how to curate that, right? And it's because you have to have that experience and be able to have that discussion with the business and say, what are your challenges? What are your opportunities? Not what data do you need. Then you can look and listen to what they're talking about. Then you can go back and take that and say, all right, we've got all this data. This is how we're going to organize it. This is how we're going to curate it and set this up. So we've got these sets of information that are available that the business can then grab this, and they can see this information in a very timely and very prepared manner, right? So.
Well, what's the downside of, because we know what the business is going to say to that question. The answer to that question is like, just give me all the data. Right?
Well, no, you don't ask that question. So first off,
I get it. No, I get it. I understand that we don't ask that. We're not supposed to ask that question because that's ultimately the answer you're going to get, and we know what that answer is. But what's the downside? Why is it that just giving them all the data isn't the best idea?
Well, that's a great question, Jared, because that is, a lot of businesses may ask that. Well, why don't I get that data? Well, again, raw data is all that noise. It's the pebble size in the street. If your business job is to cross the street and not get hit by cars, then the thing that you want from data is show me cars close to me. I need to understand vehicles close to me. If I have all of that data, then you get lost in, well, how do I cross the street? You know, I've got these pebble sizes in here, and car colors, and parked cars, and moving cars, and so
these other cars are in a garage, right? Do we care about those right now? No.
Right. And the problem is that sometimes the data doesn't tell you obviously what is important to you. So when you get a big block of data that's been given to you and it's not been curated, then you can get lost trying to get the answer you want in pieces that are not relevant to you.
Yeah, I mean, you may even assume that the column is relevant, but it actually isn't.
Exactly, and this often happens, and so people, this is what I call the Excel trap, where people are getting raw data and they're on their own trying to curate that data to be meaningful information to them, and a lot of times they'll be pulling numbers out of there that are not valid, you know, but they don't know that from the raw data there's some indicators in that data that says these data points, don't look at those. Those are, you know, something else. And so that's that whole curation.
You're making a good point.
Not to get too technical, too, but in that raw data, you've got data at all different granularities, right?
Yep.
I mean, these numbers may be monthly numbers, these may be detailed numbers. So you got to be very, very careful and really understand what's going on with that to be able to get to that curated data state that really provides that information for your business users to be able to take decisions and figure out what's going on and move forward. So,
you know, it's kind of this.
That's the important part. That's actually what's important, because the bottom line, this is all for business, right? We're talking technology, but it's just a facilitator for business if you think about it.
Absolutely.
And that's the difference maker to me between companies, and something that we do very well. We are the bridge between technology and business, and we know the purpose of why you're using technology. And sometimes you lose sight of that. You get kind of the new shiny toy that's out there, and you want to play with technology. The entire the whole purpose is to solve a business problem. So we do focus on that, and that's exactly why
one of the biggest. That's one of the biggest problems right now that I'm starting to see with people talking about these new database platforms that are out there in the cloud. Is like, oh, well, look, it's unlimited. We have no limits. Well, yeah, okay, but the limits now are the ability to actually interpret it as information. It's not a technical backend limit anymore. It's the fact that being able to take this and get what is salient to what you should be analyzing is the problem. So it's like, I mean, Arcadian, he was telling me about an article he read where, you know, just you know, you no longer have to curate data. You could just do it as a giant data set. And I'm like, man, that is such a recipe for disaster when it comes to actually enabling a business, because then you're basically back to square one with people arguing what version of the truth is correct.
Right. Well, it's the balance between self-service and self-service is the thing that everybody wants, because technology people would like to say, hey, we want to get out of the business of having to provide, you know, all this data and curate it and all this. And so let's make it self-service to our business users. The problem with that is, again, back to, if I give you access to all this raw data without doing any preparation of it and preparing it and making it meaningful, then you're just swimming in data. I always say raw data is like sewage. You know, there's good stuff in there and there's bad stuff in there. And if you're swimming in the sewage, you're going to come out.
About the good stuff.
Yeah, you're not.
Where do you live,
so, well, and so, you know, a lot of times what we do is we are the treatment plant. We have to take and say, this is important, this is not, this is meaningful, this is not. And that curation process, you know, is something that the technology today has made it a lot easier. Now, you know, if I look back many years ago, the amount of effort we used to have to do to work with data was, you know, a lot. And we didn't have the quantities of data that we have now. And so it's even more important now, the importance of being able to say, business, what is it that you want, you know, and get in the mindset of the day in the life of that business group or that department or that area, and say, okay, let's understand what it is you want. Let's not talk about the technology. Let's talk about your business, and really having those business discussions, because what will happen is they'll start to allude to information gaps that they have. We can't see this. We don't know this about our customer, or we don't know this, or we don't have a good understanding of what product mix they're buying. And as we roll out new products, our products taking, you know, the buyer's mind from one thing to another. We don't know that. How do we find that? And that's where we start to say, okay, we know what we need to focus on. And so then we start to say, all right, you've said a bunch of things about how you want information, and it's a lot of those we call it the buys. I want to know this, buy this, buy this, buy this. This starts to help us to say, okay, we start to know how to create subject areas of data. You know, I want to know sales. I want to know product mix. I want to know customers, okay? And so then we start curating that into subject areas that are meaningful, and then we create these intersections of those that start to bring in the activities, you know, the purchases, the orders, the touch points of our customers. And then when we line all those up, then we can give a curated data set that is a lot of information, but now it's made very navigable. You know, a person can easily now say, well, I want to see customers, and I want to see my salespeople, and I want to see product mix, and I can then use those canvases, those dashboard canvases, to really start making meaning of this. And that's where you kind of go from the noise to something valuable.
So when we don't have this curated layer, and I'm just trying to kind of focus on...
the fallacy that happened, well, let's talk about some of the data fallacies that happened over the last 10 years. As big data kind of came to be, and this is why a lot of people have gotten a sour taste in their mouth for big data, is we said, well, what if we got everything we got and we just threw it into this great big Hadoop monster? Okay, so all the data is there. Great. Now you go find it. And so the problem is the go find part. And so people were, you know, building tools and whatnot to kind of, you know, Google-esque this body of data, and they were getting back data that was completely irrelevant to what they were trying to do. And so tons of effort, tons of work was put in to try to make meaning of that. And really what we lost sight of is just bringing all the data together does not provide information to anybody.
Right.
Having all the data together is a huge thing for us, because now we have all of the raw materials that we need to build anything we want. Okay. But now we go back to the business and say, now tell us what you want, and that's what we're going to go build from the raw data.
Yeah, I like to say that the centralization or the data lake, it's solving the locality problem. You know, I don't have 1,000 connections that are individually connected to different analytics. I have a single location where all of this data sort of resides. So I don't have to piddle with the locality problem constantly. I've got one location where all that data exists, but that doesn't solve the conformity problem. You know, the problem that my data is all in one place, but it's you know, actually knowing what data is informational and how to use it. You know, that part is still yet to be solved. And I think this has to do with sales reps. Honestly, I'm sorry to say that, but like, I think sometimes sales reps of BI companies are, yeah, I mean, I think they kind of approach sometimes companies with this, especially on the BI side. So BI analytics, anything dashboards, you know, the whole, what I have to do is, if I'm a BI sales rep or an analytics sales rep, I've got to convince the business that this thing is so easy to use, right? That data turns into information just like magic in this tool. And the problem with that perception is that there's no awareness from clients that there's a serious amount of work. They don't see the pre-sales rep with, you know, 6 cans of Red Bull, trying to stay awake at night, putting together a demo for the client, right? But when they see it to the client, it's like, oh my gosh, this is like, you know, and then they look at their IT team or their BI team, and they're like, these guys did this like overnight. What are we wasting our time on whatever direction we're going, right? So I think this is part of the problem, is that people believe data turns into information automatically, and it doesn't. I mean, it's a lot of hard work.
You know, the interesting thing about that, though, is that it's really kind of cool that that's where we're at. We've got to train people and teach people. But I mean, in the years past, we didn't have like a Snowflake, and so there were so many other hoops that we had to jump through. Now we've got, you know, I mean, it's so exciting that there are so many tools that we can do, you know, so much with, but it's like anything, you know, along those lines, you know, you get a new Ferrari and you're like, yeah, this is really cool. It can go really fast. Well, you can also wreck it really bad too. You know,
Yes.
and so it's one of those things where there's got to be an understanding, and Snowflake and, you know, these tools, they enable us to do so many wonderful things, but it makes it even that much more important to have a clear understanding of what needs to be done and why it needs to be done and how it should be done, you know, how you build that factory. You know, so the tools are really cool. It's amazing, but what's that quote? You know, with that comes greater responsibility
power.
Or whatever.
With great power comes great responsibility. Oh, and this is again, I think sales reps bear a lot of the.
There you go. Back to sales again, Jared. I mean, the fact of the matter is these things aren't, there's a lot of work that goes into these things, but they are powerful tools, and understand who they're selling to as well. These are business users who want to see things. Yes. Sometimes, again, IT wants to build what they think you want to see, and business is selling IT what they want to see. It's not always the same thing. So it's really that delta that sales guys are selling to.
Yeah, and I mean, and of course, right now, and you have to sell a vision, and I totally get that. But you know, there's a video I released about this a couple of years back called "Beware the BI Demo," and and it just gets to me that sometimes organizations get a very jaded perception of the level of effort required to turn data into information, simply because they saw a BI demo. Someone imported an Excel spreadsheet of data, and there's no awareness of the fact that is sort of a microcosm of effort in the grander scheme of effort involved in turning data into information for the entire enterprise. So take, for example, I mean, and this really became a problem when I would say Tableau and some of those guys started gaining prominence, is and actually it started for me with Spotfire. You could take an Excel spreadsheet and just, you know, turn it into magic. I mean, it was really cool. There's all this in-memory stuff. It could just automatically generate, you know, analytics that you could sort through. The problem is that it made enterprise analytics look silly, because the level of effort looked easy because you could just import an Excel spreadsheet. You know, and I don't know. I mean, the reality of that, and I know what the arguments are. I mean, the biggest challenge with that is that when you go to deploy that corporate wide, it's undoable. There's not a in-memory structure corporate wide that could deal with all of the permutations that a client wants, unless you build a data warehouse. And so I kind of feel like that advent of in-memory analytics created some problems for people's perception of what the level of effort was to build this stuff. And I'm, Glenn, I won't tell the client name, but if you recall back one of our healthcare clients that got sold a bill of goods with an in-memory analytics demo. I mean, I ended up spending millions. I mean, tens of millions of dollars on a pipe dream, simply because they could do a quick and dirty demo of an in-memory solution, and then realizing when they try to go roll it out to the rest of the organization, it's a lot more complexity.
Right.
In that scenario, the sales guy was bad. I'll give you that one. That one also, white flags up.
Well, one of the things, and you know, so the BI vendors are out there trying to show simplification of accessing data and how you can paint the data on your screen in charts and graphs and things like that, and those are very valuable tools. You know, I don't want to cast them aside because they do provide the ability to visualize. You have to have them.
It's the topographical map. You have to have it.
It's the middle section that gets missed.
Yes.
You know, if we have raw data clear over here, you can see my hands here now. You know, it's not wide enough screen. See, you have raw material clear over here, and then you have something that you want to consume that's refined over here. If we don't have that middle process, And this is the process that a lot of organizations are afraid of, or don't have expertise in, or just don't realize the importance of that. And that is, how we refine that data into subject areas.
Yeah.
And this is so important. And we talk to our clients about this all the time is, a lot of people, when we say data warehouse, there's, eyes roll and, oh, we've tried this and it never worked. And I say, well, show me what you've built. What did you build? And I look at it and I say, well, what you built it was not a data warehouse. It was data warehouse by name only. And there were fundamentals that were missed. And so when we go back and we say, now, just like anything, fundamentally, you have to do things right. And so as we talk about, building a data warehouse, one of the things that we always are reminding everybody is we need to create conformed dimensions. I mean, and these are the subject areas, product. I want to have an understanding of product. Product is, and that's all that's in there. It's information about the given
This is
product.
the part where business people go conform dimensions. The dimensions, like is this like a multi-dimensional world? Are we?
Yeah, and then sometimes
are we going into a new bubble? Like, what's the? What are we talking about there?
If we can bridge people from once they get it, though, it's just funny. I always enjoy working with people, and they're struggling with understanding why we do this. Aren't we just moving the data somewhere else? Why are we doing this? I had a CIO of a large retail chain. And I was sitting in his office, and I was explaining this to him, and he was getting frustrated, and he kept throwing up questions and trying to say, but what about this, and what about this? And I finally said, I won't use his name, but I said, be quiet. Let me fully explain this, and then you can ask questions. And once I did that, he actually stopped for a second, got it.
No,
and
you didn't say be quiet, did you?
No, I didn't.
Something else came out.
I said something else, but I was getting frustrated with it. But he got it. And it was like it's like the angels came down and sang to him, it was like, whoa, now I get why you do this. Yeah. And then he got so entrenched in it, he made all his people read the Kimball books, and it was, required reading. And because all of a sudden we could take this block of data that they had been struggling with for years and years and years, just this enormous amount of data, and start bringing it into meaningful sets. That they say, we know what customer means. We know what product means. We know what our sales guys are. We know what our employees mean. And now we bring those curated subject areas, and we then interlace them with how they cross each other. And a lot of times products cross, orders when people order them. So that transaction of the order, we now bring that curated data to bear on that. And now we can look at things in a very organized, meaningful, cleaned up way, and we can.
And prior to that, and I think I know which client you're talking about. I mean, prior to that, you're what organizations have to rely on when they don't have this is they just have to rely on data analysts to do it manually.
The Excel spreadsheet,
manual work, and then what you get.
Division each group,
and each group has their own take on it. They have their own method of doing it. They have their own. So it's almost like now you're serving up a fondue restaurant where everybody's cooking their own food. The quality of the cooking is questionable at every turn.
Yeah.
And the ingredients are questionable as well. You don't even know what each table's getting. When I was here. I was at a BI conference. I think it was a Looker conference. One of the people that presented, I had talked with him afterwards, and he was talking to the necessity of having curated data like this in a data warehouse. And I said, well, what was it like prior? Because they were using. I don't think they were a Looker client at the time, but they were using an analytics tool to just have various analysts pull up the analytics. And he said, well, the problem we had is that we couldn't actually make decisions in our meetings. The meetings themselves were problematic because we would get in the meeting and everybody would have their own
version of it.
their own analytics, right? So one would have, Excel spreadsheet, another one would have a maybe a Tableau or even Looker. They would have just different.
Who has the latest
things.
data? Who's the latest data?
Yeah, well, then it's like,
well, where does your data
why
come
aren't you
from?
performing? Well, I'm performing just fine, and then it becomes an argument about who has the correct set of data, who has the best analytics tool, and they literally were competing on analytics. He said it wasn't until, and he says it was because after about 4 or 5 of these meetings where they just all of them broke down, he's like, we basically made a decision. We had to take a serious look at what was going on here, why we couldn't make these decisions, and why our data was so dispersed. He says that's when we started approaching the topic of actually building a data warehouse. And he says it's changed everything. He's like, our entire management meeting is a different situation completely. We don't argue about whether the data is correct. We might argue about what processes we're using, but we're not arguing whether someone has a better set of data than the other person. I think this gets back to the canvases. Go ahead.
Well, I would say the other thing, and as we kind of talk about data warehouses, and we've been doing this for a long time, and I've garnered a lot of experience, and we know what works and what doesn't work, and how to do it. I always say the telltale signs of a good data warehouse, even if we're dealing with a lot of data behind it, is that the data warehouse itself is very simple. It is very refined, and the business consumers can easily navigate it and use it. When I see data warehouses where it's thousands of tables, I always go, something went wrong here. We crashed and burned somewhere.
You can run this report looking at this number, but only on Tuesdays. And if you're,
exactly. Yeah, you have to know to use this one on this situation and use this one over here for this situation.
Right.
And
if you're joining it to products, you have to use this number. But if you're actually, looking at orders also, then you have to go use this other number. It's a nightmare, and then nobody can use it.
So
and then you have
the
the same
signs
problem that you were talking about, Jared, where now people are arguing about the data, and instead of having information to be able to take decisions and move the business forward. So,
and I've kind of noticed that even, for example, the data cataloging.
Well, even
now we're losing you, Troy. But
I remember years ago we were working with a customer. Sorry.
There you go. Now you're back.
We're working with a large healthcare company who spent $70 million in a data warehouse with 6 users. There you are.
Oh.
Can you hear me?
$70 million for 6 users. That is crazy.
Well, and a lot of times this is what ends up happening is because we don't have we're not plugged into the business and we don't understand the business needs. You get myopic
for 6 users, and that's an issue.
Yeah.
So doesn't this get to when people build data warehouses like this that are just bombs? Do you think this is largely due to the fact that it was attempted to derive the business requirements from the raw data? I mean, isn't that most of the reasons? That's
often a big, what causes problems, and when people.
Why can't you do that? Like piece that apart. Like, why is it that you can't look at the data and then say, well, look, this is a customer, this is a product, this is. I mean, it would seem like you could do that.
Well, you could sit down as a data engineer and look at data from different sources and say, well, I've got some customer information here and I've got product information over here, and maybe I've got some other details over there. Again, that's doing some level of curation, but you have to take it further than that. This is where, and I always appreciate Ralph Kimball saying this, and he always says it at the beginning of any of his books. His comment was, if the business isn't driving this, then it will fail. So the number one thing is we have to understand what is it that the business wants to do. You use the example of crossing the street. Well, if the business wanted to analyze the pebbles in the road, then having that data about the pebble size would be germane. But if they just wanted to cross the road, we don't need to focus in on some of that noise. And so understanding what the business is trying to accomplish, what's important to them. I made that reference to the CIO I talked to at a large retail store. We sat down with them and we started talking about, what do you want to do with this data? And they said, well, we have this huge problem with managing our salespeople on the floor of our department store. and just simply standing behind a cash register and getting paid to stand behind the cash register. They're not selling anything. And we want our people to go and talk to our customers and upsell them, you know, hey, you're buying a pair of pants. Have you thought about a shirt? Let me show you some shoes, you know, all that stuff. And they weren't getting that out of their salespeople. And so we looked at it and we said, but you have the data, you could do that. And so we sat down and started kind of disassembling their data into meaningful subject areas. We want to understand sales. We want to understand product mix. We want to understand employees. We want to understand, you know, when we're seeing things from sales items, promotional items versus standard price, you know, all this stuff. And we sat down and we created a data warehouse for them, and then created some reports specifically to support their sales people and helping them drive change. And it was so successful, and we did it in one region, in the Northeast region. It was so successful that the head of the chain of department stores said, "What are you guys doing? Because you literally have changed everything. All of a sudden, people are acting the way we want them to. People are not being, you know, getting their commissions by simply standing behind the cash register anymore."
But there was some magic you did on the front end, if I remember correctly. It wasn't just.
It was a combination. It was back end and front end.
Give me some of the goodies on the front end.
So one of the things that we did is they had spent all this money training their sales associates to upsell. Spent millions of dollars putting everybody through this training, and everybody came back and stood behind the cash register. And they said, "Well, we're frustrated. How do we change this?" And I said, "Well, information like the information in the dashboard on your car provides you information to drive you to make behavioral changes." And so by taking data, what we did is we created a very simple report that was posted in the break room of every place, and it listed by department who were the top salespeople. And we had a red line in the report, a big, heavy red line. And if you were above the red line, you were in good standing. If you were below the red line, you were in poor standing. And if you stayed below the red line, you could be dismissed. And what we changed is we started to analyze what the sales patterns were for each employee. And we started to say, if we see an employee start to create a product mix that is, in essence, upselling, you know, so if they bring to the cash register pants, shirts, and a tie, most likely the salesperson upsold it. We also looked at frequency of how often they did a transaction. And so if we see one salesperson doing transaction one after the other, we know they're standing behind a cash register. Okay.
Well, and Glenn, one of the other key things too, remember, you know, when Jared's asking what were the, you know, the goodies here, we also took all of that data, turned it into information so that we could provide the sales associate, for example, if you're below the red line, this is why, and this is what you need to do to get above the red line. So it wasn't just a measurement. It wasn't just a measurement. It was a how do you change? It was information to drive change in the.
Was it like in a key or something, like in the dashboard?
No, they actually printed it and stuck it up on the walls.
Yeah, this was before everybody had a dashboard on there, and you think these are people that are out on the sales floor, so they're not sitting in front of a computer.
Right. So we purposely printed it on a what was it? They were big white sheets, 11 by 17 or something like that.
Right.
And they would print it every morning and stick it on the wall. And
when they came into their break room, they saw it.
Got it.
And then we created promotional sales. Employee promotional products from that data as well. And so if you were the leader in your department, you got an award. I mean, we did all this stuff. We had the president of the company totally, you know, amazed at what this was doing, because we were taking now raw data from cash register point of sale systems. We were taking data from the sales of the company. What's that?
No,
we're taking data from. I think Troy is.
I don't know who's.
Sorry, my Wi-Fi is going crazy. My apologies.
But it was listening to what the business wanted, being able to identify where the data raw data could come from, bringing it together, organizing it so that we could turn it into meaningful stuff, and then
I think we're getting feedback from you.
Meaningful stuff.
Yeah, let me. There we go.
And he was never heard of again.
And that was one of the keys, and really all this stuff that we're talking about is that this is where experience comes into play, right? It's understanding the technology, understanding data, those types of things, but then also being able to translate that, understand the business, marry those two together.
Mm-hmm.
And in that particular project that we've been talking about, that ability to be able to understand the business, understand from the business what they wanted to accomplish, what their challenges were, where they wanted to go, and then be able to take that data, look at that data, say, how do we curate that data? How do we present that data in a way that's going to drive change within our organization down to the individual level, and help develop the members of our organization and help them to progress and move forward in a way that's going to allow us to be more successful and to meet our business goals, right? That was the beauty there.
And let's just take that a little bit further though, Jared. Because we organized that data form and got it into a data warehouse that was meaningful, we were then able to work with HR, who then took some of the similar data, because of the way we organized it, and use it to be able to work with their sales associates to create, because they did, quarterly reviews, and we were able to provide them, factual data about that employee's performance. So when they had the review, it wasn't an emotional thing, it was a factual thing.
Yeah, yeah. Well,
and then we took that same data and we then provided it to the buyers, and the buyers were using it to understand what was selling and where we had product, and all of a sudden, the fact that we started to organize that data and had visibility to all these different things started to really open up avenues of decision making in many different parts of the organization.
I mean, one thing that is really, really interesting to me, I mean, and it's, I don't know, it's probably a less explored side of this, and maybe it's because I work in the world of the visual a lot, but that red line report that you were talking about, I mean, there's a side of analytics that I don't know if it's been fully vetted yet. I think we've gotten so enamored with, things that move on our dashboard, that we haven't really thought through the actual behavioral visualizations.
Well, we can often we overcomplicate the visual.
Yeah.
Sometimes, simple is easier. You get in a car sometimes, and in some of these newer cars, there's so many dials and dashes and electronic things that are flying up on your screen. I know sometimes I'll rent a car.
Not on a Tesla.
Get in my car and turn it on. I'm like, wow, where's all the gauges? Confusing here. And sometimes just having simplicity, a lot of times I say when we're creating dashboards and reports, if you really understand the business, if the creator of the dashboard really understands what the business needs, then they can create a dashboard that is very
simple,
visually impactful to the business. But I see sometimes junior report writers and dashboard people, they want to throw charts in there, and they'll throw charts in that are meaningless. And you look at them and you go, what does that tell me? Well, it's really cool. Really cool.
There's a lot of use of things that are not even really that relevant. I've noticed was especially the case. You remember Excelsius?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, so Excelsius was it was a fun tool to fuss with, because you could really do some interesting things. But you'd see these dashboards that were just totally visual just to be visual, but had no there was no usefulness to it. And so that's an area, and I mean, for listeners, I would love to get feedback on if there's any science on this, on the behavioral side of analytics and the visualization of data in a way that isn't flashy, but is focused on what are the methods of visualization that will deliver the most behavioral impact. And this is one of the things I wrote a white paper about this a couple of years back, and we've only got about 5 minutes left, but one of the things I wrote about in the white paper is just this realization that I had that this world that we're in of turning data into information, a lot of what we're doing is trying to drive an organizational behavior, a desired organizational behavior. Now, it doesn't get sold that way in most cases in most businesses. It gets sold as, hey, we're having frustration with, making decisions or what have you. But ultimately, this is probably one of the most impactful methods of getting an organization to get their act together.
Yes.
Because it's data, and people know it's data, and they can't circumvent it. And so if you can actually make analytics, if you can take on the ethos that the analytics are the mechanism for which we drive a behavioral change, I think it's powerful. And I think I don't know that gets enough play.
Well, it really takes somebody that has a gift in both the technical side and the business side. You have to kind of bridge both. And so, people that are good BI producers, mm-hmm. they'll be very plugged into the business, and they know what the business is looking for. And flashy isn't always better. Sometimes simplicity is better. And as I look, I get to see lots of reports and lots of ways that people are presenting their data. And I always ask the question, tell me, business, how you use this. Tell me, Mr. Executive, when you look at this dashboard that was created for you, what does it tell you, or what doesn't it tell you? And then a lot of times they say, there's a lot of noise on here. I don't need this, chart here, and I don't need that chart there. It's all about understanding what is the critical piece that they need.
Yeah, I got to mute Troy here. There he is. He's on mute now.
Yeah, sorry, I just ran out for a quick lunch.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, guys, I think this was really good. We got some old friends of ours that are pinging us on GoToWebinar. I don't know if you saw the comments there, but
I like the question.
Yeah.
It's true, by the way. So.
Yeah, it is a true answer. We can't reveal the question, but it is a true answer, or a true. But folks, we'll be doing this every Friday. We're going to be just going over a smattering of topics. It's going to be a lot of different kinds of topics and scenarios. And I think we hit on sort of the fundamentals of what it is that we do, and talk through some of the challenges that we look to solve, and just some of the thinking that we have. I'll be taking this video and posting it on our Intricity 101 YouTube channel. So you can share it with friends. And thanks for joining us. And Glenn, Rich, Arcady joined late, so he's and Troy, thank you all for joining us, and we'll catch you all next week.
All right, thanks everyone.
All right,
take care.
See y'all later.